13 years passed, and each Thursday at precisely 7:30, massive trucks rolled into the gravel driveway, their engines humming in the morning chill. The drivers never lingered long. They hooked up to the dump beds, emptied their precious cargo of rough-cut white oak, and vanished back toward the lumber yard like ghosts at dawn. Most assumed Margaret Hale despised these arrivals, but she actually welcomed them, for each shipment meant another chance to transform what others discarded into something extraordinary. The peculiar arrangement started in 1992 when Margaret inherited 85 acres from her grandfather Samuel, land that bordered the struggling county lumber yard. For months, the mill workers grappled with an ongoing dilemma: short offcuts, twisted slats, live edge pieces, and wide sections too valuable to burn but too irregular for standard lumber sales. Transporting them to landfills drained finances, while burning them squandered quality hardwood. One drenching afternoon, the yard manager appeared at her door, removing his cap with deliberate care. "Afternoon," he greeted simply. Margaret offered a warm smile. "Come in." But he gestured toward the fence instead. "We've got a question." After a moment of silence, he asked, "What kind?" Then, rubbing his neck awkwardly, he added, "Mind if we dump oak behind your north pasture?" Margaret studied the overgrown corner where nothing much happened, rocky soil with poor drainage. "How much?" she inquired. The manager chuckled. "More than you'd believe," she smiled. "Fine." Neither realized they'd just set in motion 2 decades of transformation. The first truck arrived the following Thursday, followed by another the next week, then another, each load steadily expanding the piles. Most pieces appeared valueless, crooked, uneven, oddly sized, some still bearing bark. Neighbors dismissed them as junk, others saw firewood. Samuel saw something different. One evening when Margaret turned 16, she trailed him toward the accumulating mountains of timber. He lifted a thick white oak slab, tracing his hand along the grain, then grinned. "Pretty." Margaret laughed. "This," Samuel nodded. "Most beautiful board here." She looked again, seeing roughness and ugliness. "What use could there be?" Samuel tilted the slab toward the sunlight. Golden rays revealed intricate swirling grain beneath the rough exterior. "Furniture," he said softly. Years later, those words remained etched in her heart. After Samuel's death, Margaret inherited more than land. She received his woodworking shed, ancient hand planes, cabinet makers' chisels, books on joinery and finishing, plus dozens of notebooks filled with designs and techniques. One phrase appeared repeatedly: "Straight boards build houses. Interesting boards build heirlooms." At first poetic, eventually it became her blueprint. The Thursday trucks continued their punctual arrival, and the oak piles swelled enormously. Locals joked constantly about them. One Saturday morning at the diner, Dale Harper spotted Margaret's truck through the window. "There she is," he announced. "Lumber lady." Rick looked up. "Junk collector," Dale replied, earning laughter around the booth, not cruel but the comfortable kind people reserve for those they think they've figured out. A farmer asked, "How much firewood you got now?" "Too much," Margaret answered with a smile. "You planning to heat the county?" "No." Then Margaret gazed toward distant hills. "Tables." Table erupted even louder. "Tables, from scrap." "Those crooked boards," Margaret nodded simply. Nobody believed her. She'd never sold furniture, never operated a workshop, never advertised anything. That winter she revisited Samuel's journals, practicing dovetails by night, mortise and tenon joints by day. Hours stretched into weeks, weeks into months. The first table looked terrible, the second slightly less so, the third nearly level. By the 15th piece, something shifted. The grain, the character, the live edges everyone called defects transformed into beauty. Margaret ceased seeing scrap and began seeing stories. One evening her brother Nathan wandered into the dust-filled workshop where half-finished tables leaned against every wall. He paused, then laughed. "You're doing it again." "What?" "The workshop." Nathan smiled. "That means you're obsessed." "Probably." He picked up a finished tabletop, running his hand across the smooth oak. "This came from the pile." "Thursday's delivery," Margaret confirmed. Nathan looked back toward the fence. "I would have burned it." "I know." Spring brought the county craft fair. Margaret rented the smallest booth possible, displaying one dining table and 2 benches. People admired them, touched the grain, asked questions. Nobody bought. The drive home felt disappointing. Nathan tried encouraging her. "They liked them." They didn't buy them. They remembered them. The second fair yielded one sale, a retired couple buying a dining table for cash, insisting Margaret load it into their trailer herself. As they drove away, Margaret watched quietly, not for the money, but because someone wanted something she'd created. Orders trickled in slowly, one table, then another, then another. Restaurants requested larger pieces. A bed and breakfast ordered 6. A local winery asked for tasting room furniture. Margaret never advertised. Every order came through word of mouth. Business grew steadily and comfortably. Meanwhile, lumber trucks kept arriving every Thursday. The piles never seemed to shrink. Each load contained future tabletops, benches, possibilities. One humid July afternoon, a traveling furniture designer stopped at the winery, spending 20 minutes studying Margaret's oak tables. Finally asking, "Who made this?" "The local woman," the owner replied. "Can I meet her?" 3 days later, the designer toured Margaret's workshop, examining stacks, slabs, drying racks, finished pieces. He said little, eventually stopping beside a completed dining table, running both hands across the grain, then smiling. "This isn't scrap wood," he said. Margaret folded her arms. "I know." Designer looked toward the enormous oak piles behind the fence, then back again. "You have enough material here for years." "Probably." A long pause. "Then have you ever considered selling outside the county?" The question echoed in Margaret's mind all week. Have you ever considered selling outside the county? Until that moment, she'd never given it serious thought. The workshop kept her busy enough. Every table sold before she finished the next. Restaurants recommended her. Lodges ordered matching sets. Families waited months for custom pieces. Comfortable business. The designer circled the workshop again, nodding. Stacks of drying oak along one wall. Finished tabletops leaned against another. Outside, another truck from the lumber yard backed toward the familiar dumping spot. The driver waved. Margaret waved back. "You know, most companies pay thousands for lumber like this," the designer observed. Margaret looked toward the fresh pile. "I've never paid $1, he laughed softly. "That's exactly why you should think bigger." Month later, he invited Margaret to a regional furniture exhibition. Initially refusing, she finally agreed after Nathan convinced her. "You've got nothing to lose." She loaded 3 dining tables onto a borrowed trailer, one farmhouse, one modern live edge, one traditional trestle design. Every piece came from what others called scrap. The exhibition hall intimidated her. Massive furniture companies occupied enormous displays with professional lighting and branding. Margaret's booth consisted of 3 tables, a folding chair, and a handwritten sign. She expected little. Instead, people kept stopping, not because of the sign but because of the wood. Visitors ran fingers across flowing grain, studied natural edges, asked questions. Margaret always answered the same way. "Behind my fence." Most assumed she was joking. By day's end, all 3 tables sold. By the second day, she collected business cards filling an entire notebook, from interior designers, boutique hotels, restaurant owners, architects. One buyer asked, "Can you produce more?" Margaret hesitated. "I think so." Following year transformed everything. She expanded the workshop, not into a factory but into a larger craftsmanship studio. 3 local woodworkers joined her, then 2 more, young craftsmen preferring furniture construction to house framing. Every Thursday, lumber trucks continued arriving. Only now the piles disappeared almost as quickly as they formed. One afternoon, the lumber yard manager visited. He watched employees sorting fresh white oak, then laughed. "You know," Margaret looked up, "we used to pay thousands monthly to throw this stuff away." She smiled. "I remember." He shook his head. "And now we're delivering your inventory." "Looks that way." County never fully understood, assuming Margaret simply maintained a busy woodworking hobby. The nickname evolved from junk collector to table lady. Jokes continued. One Saturday morning at the diner, Dale Harper watched another trailer loaded with finished furniture roll past. "There goes another table. Many people need tables." Rick laughed. Margaret walked in just then. "Business good." "Very." "Still making tables from garbage." "Still." "You don't have to understand it." Margaret smiled politely. "You don't have to." 2 years later, a national home design magazine photographer visited, spending an entire afternoon capturing furniture, oak piles, hand tools, old drying sheds. He loved the story almost as much as the craftsmanship. Design blogs picked it up, then interior designers, then buyers nationwide. Emails arrived faster than Margaret could respond. Waiting lists stretched to 8 months. Nathan entered the office carrying another stack of orders, dropping them on her desk. "You're going to need help." Margaret studied the pile. "I know, lots of help." The biggest surprise came 6 months later, she added. An executive from a major furniture retailer requested a visit. "I nearly declined. Someone else should handle accounts that size." Instead, a small team arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. They toured every building, examined joinery, watched sanding, studied techniques. Finally, the lead buyer stopped beside a massive white oak dining table, resting both hands on the surface, closing his eyes briefly, then smiling. "This is exactly what we're looking for." Margaret remained silent. "We're launching a collection built around authentic American craftsmanship." Long pause. "We'd like your tables to be part of it." Silence filled the workshop. Nathan looked toward Margaret. Margaret looked toward the giant oak piles beyond the window, then back again. Serious? Very. Negotiations lasted months. Margaret insisted on keeping production local, no overseas manufacturing, no particle board, no veneers. Solid American white oak, hand-finished. The retailer agreed. Orders began the following spring. For the first time, dining tables crafted from discarded oak behind Margaret's fence appeared in beautiful showrooms nationwide. The county didn't learn until one Saturday. Dale Harper and his wife shopped for furniture in the city. His wife stopped abruptly. "No." "What? No," he frowned. "What?" The display, massive live-edge white oak dining table beneath elegant lighting. Small sign, Margaret Hale Workshop. Dale read it again, then once more. "No," his wife smiled. "I think that's your table, lady." Drive home felt unusually quiet. Monday morning, the diner filled early. Dale carried a furniture catalog under his arm, dropping it on the breakfast counter. "No." Rick looked up. "What now?" Dale opened the catalog. Beautiful photographs covered the pages. Centered Margaret's dining table, the room fell silent. Someone whispered, "She built that." Dale nodded slowly. "From the lumber piles." By lunchtime, the entire county knew. That afternoon, the lumber yard manager delivered another truckload of white oak. This time, several employees climbed down first, standing quietly, looking toward the workshop. Machines hummed inside. Craftsmen carefully assembled another dining table. Forklifts moved carefully stacked slabs. Finished furniture waited for shipment. One employee shook his head. "We've been throwing away a furniture business for 13 years. Manager smiled. "Looks like we have." One autumn evening, Nathan stood beside Margaret overlooking the property. The familiar oak piles stretched behind the north fence, smaller now but never gone. Beyond them stood the expanded workshop. Delivery trucks loaded finished furniture. Employees locked up for the evening. The smell of fresh-cut white oak drifted through cool air. "You know what still bothers me?" Nathan asked. Margaret smiled. "What?" "They called it junk." "Yes, for years." He looked toward the workshop. "They laughed." Margaret nodded. "I know." Long silence settled over the farm. "What did Grandpa actually see?" Nathan asked finally. Margaret picked up a rough oak slab from the newest delivery. Bark remained attached. Edges looked twisted. Most would call it firewood. She turned it toward the fading sunlight. Golden rays illuminated spectacular swirling grain beneath the rough surface, exactly as Samuel had done years before. He saw the table hiding inside the tree. For 13 years, the lumber yard believed they were paying to dispose of waste. The county thought Margaret collected scrap. Neighbors saw firewood, crooked boards, worthless cutoffs. Margaret saw possibility, patience, craftsmanship. Every Thursday, another truck backed up to the fence and unloaded what everyone else had rejected. One board at a time, one table at a time, one customer at a time, until the wood once destined for the landfill became handcrafted dining tables admired across the country. Because sometimes the greatest value isn't created by finding better materials. It's created by seeing what everyone else has already decided isn't worth seeing.